It's Chaf Hei Tammuz. What that means? It's Menachem's birthday. He would be 25 today. Yeah. This is his birthday. Okay, can the Mara Nachama Achus? Amen. We'll take it. From holy people, we'll take brachas anytime. Take brachas anybody. Amen. B'tei v'nira v'anigle. B'tei v'nira v'anigle. Yeah. Lamata masar tzvach. Okay, Rabbi say we're at the end of Perek Ches. Okay, we're at the end of Perek Ches of Tanya, which means, I guess it's you Gimel Beis. Let me page 26. Mamish the last couple of lines. It's been a while since we learned Tanya. Last Sunday was Shivas B'Tammuz. The Sunday before that, Yud Tammuz, I think I was here. So we must have learned Tanya then. It's only 2 weeks. Seems like a long time. Now, Perek Ches, the 8th chapter of Tanya, is a continuation, I guess, of the discussion of how Klipa and Aveda are not synonymous. That's the word. Klipa and Aveda are not the same. In other words, for something to be Klipa, it doesn't have to be an Aveda. If something is an Aveda, it's Klipa, but if something is Klipa, it doesn't necessarily be an Aveda. What we in this learning, from the beginning, was introduced to the discussion the word Tumah, which of course is a word that the Alter Rebbe uses. And I believe that when people learn Tanya, it gets overlooked. I really believe that the way people learn Tanya, no one is mesim lev to how the Alter Rebbe used the word. I shouldn't say no one. At least the people who taught me Tanya were not mesim lev to the word Tumah. And I'll tell you the philosophy, but I'll tell you the Hoygoyim. The philosophy is a very, very simple thing. Nothing can exist without life. And life has to come from somewhere. That's it. Nothing can exist without life, and life has to come from something. So any activity in which a person engages, they are, in Chitas, yesterday, and again, Satshuvas of Perek Vav, simultaneous drawing life from something, and if they're a Yid, they're giving life to this that gives them, that enlivens them, right? Alter Rebbe says, since Klipa is Mechaber Chayes Meyid, who Neitel Chelit Bereish. So when a person is involved with anything, there is life necessary for that involvement. He's taking life from someplace. And in the case of a Yid, as he takes life, he also gives life. And accordingly, the Alter Rebbe introduces us to the notion that if I have to live from somewhere, I got two choices. I could live from Kedusha, which is also called Tahara, or I could live from Tumah, which is also called Klipa. Now, a bad thing, evil, Ra, is obviously Klipa. But there's so much which is neither good nor bad. It's Parev, it's in the middle. If it's Parev, what gives me Chayes? So the Alter Rebbe argues, when you're doing something Parev, it depends on the Kavanah, you understand. If the Kavanah is L'Shem Shamayim, then you're getting life from Kedusha and you're giving life to Kedusha. If your kavanah is the opposite of L'Shem Shamayim, then obviously you're connected to Tumah. You're giving life to Tumah and take life to Tumah. If you have no kavanah, this is the Alter Rebbe's Chiddush in the beginning of chapter 7, the previous page. Alter Rebbe says there's no kavanah, it remains what it was. And the tricky point here is that Klipas Neg is Klipa. I'm sorry? Klipas Neg is Klipa. So the Alter Rebbe has been using the word Tumah more than the word Klipa to bring out the point that there are many things we do which are not bad, but they're not good either. If they're bad, now I'm going to speak in Misnagdisha words, okay? But the Alter Rebbe uses these Misnagdisha words, okay? The person doesn't have Aveda, you have to go to Gehenna. If it's not an Aveda, but it's Tumah, so in Gehenna you don't have to have, but it's got to be cleaned off. So the Alter Rebbe introduced us to these ideas of Chibad HaKeved and Kafat Kela. I want to tell you something interesting. Everything is Bashgacha Pratis. I have a Shia Shabbos morning in the museum in Lukut Torah. And yesterday was Shabbos Mavorchim, so it's tricky. We have a separate room and everyone has to say Tillim. And we're learning a mind from Pinchas. The first mind in Pinchas on the Kutateda, well, the Alter Rebbe talks about Tshuva. And Alter Rebbe says a very interesting thing. Tshuva can only be done in this world. Tshuva can only be done in this world. Why? The Nekuda is, because since this world is a world of Mishagas, it's all chaotic, it's all mixed up, it's not orderly. In a chaotic world, what's the lowest can be connected to the highest, and you can use the negative into a positive. The minute a person leaves this world over there, everything is organized. If it's organized, you can't do Tshuva. So the Alter Rebbe says, so you automatically go through Kafakela. That's how he describes it. In other words, it's not like Abishter puts you in Kafakela. Abishter doesn't put you with anything. A neshama was in the goof. And the neshama leaves the goof. So if you have Avedas, Rachmana Litzlan, that is again, do you judge? You punish. Oh, but it's not kind of Aveda. It's not an Aveda. It's just Tumah. So the Abishter doesn't punish you. But it has to be cleaned. So the process that the neshama goes through automatically is chibut hakever and kafakela. He explains how. He pushes it. You know, we all have a brain. I'm using it in my own words. Our brain doesn't forget anything. Nothing is lost in the brain. If nothing is lost in the brain, in the neshama, for sure nothing is lost. Yeah? But we forgot. Thank God, right? It says in Sfarim that one of the greatest brachas that we have is shikha. Right? Chazaka, lames, shemishtakach me'alev, without shikha, you couldn't live. You'd go crazy. But the minute a person passes away, all those memories come back. That is chibut hakever and kafakela. That's it. Abish doesn't do anything. I just experience all of those in Yonim. We're not talking about Avedas. We're just talking about such things that can't go under the category of Kedusha and Tahara. So they go into the category of Tumah. It comes back. Now that you don't have a goof, and you have Nefesh Bahamis, it hurts. And it hurts until it cleans. The Alter Rebbe describes Kafakela as not something which is done, as treft. In other words, the cleansing is like a self-clean. When the neshama is in the goof, and we have control of our mind, so we put things in a box, we put them away, we don't think about them. And when we think about them, we don't feel so bad because we have lots of headache. When a person's neshama leaves his goof, all those memories come back, and that is just the fact that the memories come back. That's the kafakela, and the yisurim of experiencing those memories cleanses the memories, and then they're gone. That's how the Alter Rebbe describes it. So Perek Ches is not talking about onesh. It's not talking about punishment. It's talking about the idea that in life there's tumah, and when a neshama leaves this goof, in order to go to the higher world, he has to rid of the tumah. And one of the processes of getting rid of the tumah is called chibut hakever and kafakela. And he gave a number of examples of the kind of things which are not Avedas. I had yesterday a shir, a chavrusa, with a young man at the end of Shabbos, and he showed me Allah and Hilchos Shabbos. Then he gave the Dvar B'Telim. You're not supposed to speak Dvar B'Telim on Shabbos. Now, a ganze Woche kommen nicht to speak Dvar B'Telim. But all week you shouldn't speak Dvar B'Telim. Dvar B'Telim means words that are nonsense. We're not talking about Lashon Hara. We're not talking about Rechilus. We're not talking about Avedas. We're talking about nonsense. Shabbos is a special halacha. More than during the week, you shouldn't speak Dvar B'Telim. What if a person pushed it in? Simple guy. He's not shaychus to learn. He's not a very deep person. This is his pleasure. So then this becomes Einik Shabbos. So for some people, Dvar B'Telim is b'chlal not appropriate, particularly on Shabbos. For another person, this is his madrigas, it becomes Einik Shabbos. So I wonder if because it becomes Einik Shabbos, it becomes Gona Mitzvah. But the Alter Rebbe is trying to describe things that are not sins, but they're tumah. So you don't get punished for it. But it has to be cleansed out, and it happens from itself. That's what the Alter Rebbe is trying to describe Kafakela. I find it very fascinating, very interesting. What were the examples we had? The first example was having pleasure from Elam Hazeh, enjoying physical, especially food. The second is called Dvarim B'Telim Be'et, where people speak Dvarim B'Telim, words that are allowed, and it's permitted. A person who's b'choyev to learn Torah Yom V'Layla, it's a shalom B'Dvarim B'Telim. A person who's not able to learn B'Layla, it's called Dvarim B'Telim Be'et. And the last thing in the Perek was Chochmas Chitzenius. Chochmas is secular knowledge. It says in Gemara, it's an halacha, that a person is not allowed to say, I learned Kol HaTeira Kula, I know the whole Torah, I'm going to go and learn other Chochmas. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to learn, not only now learn Chochmas Chitzenius because you're still busy learning Torah and he doesn't have to finish Kol HaTorah Kula. Even if a person successfully learns the Kol HaTorah Kula, he's still not allowed to go and learn other Chochmas because it ain't Ikar HaSaki Ela Bam. The person's busy with the Bam. My whole life is Torah. So it says in Svarim, Kabbalah Svarim, I'm assuming, it's brought in Tanya, that like any Dvarim B'Teilim, it's also Metameh. And again, we're using the word Tumah how? It's not an Aved. No, but then it's not Kedusha. So we're talking about Chochmas Chitzenius, which is Klipas Nega. We're not talking about Chochmas Chitzenius of Aved Zarah. We're not talking about Chochmas Chitzenius of Kefina. We're not talking about Chochmas Chitzenius, which involves Gili Aroyas or some other Aved. We're talking about Chochmas Chitzenius, which is Sach Haka Klipas Nega. That's all it is. It's Klipa. It's Nega. It's neutral. It's benign. It's not Treif. But then it's not holy. So there's even Tumah. So I'll add one more point. That is, it's Metama Chabad. That because you're using your mind, it goes into the mind, and it brings a contamination to the mind. If you were here 2 weeks ago, I fabreng about this. We fabreng about this. They eat from Metama Chabad Shabbat. And it's real. It's real. I'm a 53-year-old man. It's so funny. Who cares about my age? Yeah? But when you live life, you gain a different perspective. I mean, I was once 23, and I was once 19 and 20, when you're young, you don't know yet what you don't know. It's just the way it works. And in my mind, what I'm saying to myself is, every generation starts from the beginning. My children start, not where I am now, but where I was when I was a baby. So they have to go through all the steps. And when you get to become an adult, and you're intelligent, and you like information, and you start to read, you don't appreciate the sakana of Chochmas Chitzenius, especially if it's Sachaka Klipas Negi. You don't understand why it is. You almost feel like it's a brainwashing, it's a closed-mindedness. Only after you dabble in it, you say, oh, now I understand. The sakana, it's a sakana, it's a dangerous thing. So a person is not allowed to dabble in Chochmas Chitzenius because, first of all, even if he's not if he's Mochoy V'Talmud Torah to become the Shach of Bittul Torah, because it's an Aved. If he's not Mochoy V'Talmud Torah, then it goes into the category of Dvarim B'Teilim Beheaded. But because it's intellectual, and he enjoys it, and it stimulates his mind, and it has some kind of an exciting, exhilarating effect on his muhus, I'm a smart guy, it's Metama Chabad Nefesh. This is what we learned last week. And this is why the Rebbe was so, the Rebbe's shita about Chochmas Chitzenius. You know, you can say in the same breath, the Rebbe was an extremist, and in the same breath you can say he wasn't extreme at all. He just simply explained it the way it is. I've told this to you so many times. Two Sundays ago, I spent the whole time. I'm repeating what I said to you. The Nakuda of that Sikha that the Rebbe spoke some Chasdei Tashit as well. By the way, a part of it is a Nakuda Sikha Skelek Aleph, Mishpatim, Akol Bar Pesha, Se'ah, Chamela, She'ah, Chamela, Se'ah, Zama, Kol Aveda, Asherei Mekiyu Zeh. It's a Nakuda Sikha. Part of what the Rebbe said that's in Chasdei. But the Nakuda that the Rebbe was trying to make in Chasdei is the following. Who invented mandatory education? Who invented mandatory education? Jews did. Period. Conversation over. Until 150 years ago, 170 years ago, there was no such thing as a public school system, not in America, and not in Europe, not any place. So who got an education? Children from very rich homes, princes, princesses. Most people were raised illiterate. It was life. Jews always taught their children. When the poorest of children went to Cheder, and the community paid. I'm not going to say the Cheder gave them 3-course meals and half lunches and good busing, and they made sure that the shoes didn't have holes. But they taught them. They taught them how to read. They taught them Chumash Rashi. They taught them how to daven. And if they had the aptitude, they taught them how to think and reason and sent them off to yeshivas. This goes back since the beginning. Jewish people invented chinuch. Now the world is given klug, or they klicker farums. The world finally realized that using the mind of every child, even an ordinary child, makes them a better person. So we should make mental education. And now they're going to teach us what we've known for 3,000 years. Since Avraham Avinu started teaching his children, I always tell you this, that it says, Avraham Avinu gave the world three gifts. Avraham Avinu gave the world three gifts: monotheism, charity, and education. So it says in Chumash, Ki yadaitiv, why do I love Avraham Avinu? Loshan chive, l'man asher yetzaves, bonav, besi acharav. Because what he has is giving his children. It's the deepest nekudah of our very anchor. Before we were a nation, we knew the value of education. And education never was about parnasa. It never was. Education was not about career. It wasn't about parnasa. It was about being a yid, being a mensch. So what the Rebbe objected to is he came to America. This is what bothered the Rebbe so deep. And it wasn't the pshat. See, before the war, the Haredim came here in a trickle. The ultra-Orthodox came here in a trickle. 1, 2, 3, and they all came at a very hard time. And they couldn't establish communities, and they were very poor, and they had to work so hard. But after the war, they came here in the Torah, in the tens of thousands. And all of them, b'li yitzim min haklal, bought into the American model of education that at least half a day you're learning chol, limudei chol, and it's as important as limudei kodesh, and it's part of education. So the Rebbe's issue was fundamental. The Rebbe's issue was not only practical. It was what happened to our conscience. What happened to our identity? For thousands of years, we were mesa nefesh. If nobody tells us to educate our kids. It's not the pshat we came to America and they forced us. We didn't even put up a fight. You know, in Russia, everybody knows the story. The Chassidim and the Misnagdim. The Chassidim and the Misnagdim fought a war to the death. The Tzemach Tzedek was prepared to give his life. And the Yitzchak Volozhin, the son of Reb Chaim Volozhin, was on the Misnagdish side, was his partner. The government of Russia should not have an ounce of say in Jewish education. We came to America, there was no meeting, there was no arrests, there was no threats. It was America. That's what bothered them. What happened to us? How could it be we all forgot the very definition of what it means, raising a Jewish child? Raising a Jewish child that they should be Jewish. Period. Russia was not a culture. Poland was not a culture. Hungary was not a culture. Spain was not a culture. Portugal was not a culture. Western Europe was not a culture. Jews raised their children to be Jews. That's what chinuch was. And so there's two issues. Number one, what we're doing. And number two, that we're so apathetic, we're so guilty, we're so unprincipled about the way we're addressing it. Sometimes you don't have a choice. But be reluctant. Be reluctant. Acknowledge that it's not supposed to be this way. Shashtu. So the Rebbe spoke that sikha with so much passion. Again, I wasn't born in 1954. I wasn't born. I literally wasn't born. My father was a nedach, 17 years old. So I don't remember that fabregin, but and they say that the sikha that we have is missing because the Rebbe said such sharp things. The person faked around the time. People who are that sikha will say that the way the Rebbe expressed it was so sharp they push it, afraid to push it, to put it to paper. Incredible, because everyone was so upset about it. And this is the principle. The principle is the principle. It's not only the actual, but it's the principle. Chinuch is Torah. Period. That's what education is. You give your children Yiddishkeit. This is how it always was. And this is how it's supposed to be. It's Taka America, but we're still Jews. Same table, same everything. We've been through worse. We've been through harder. And we never bent in the way we define the word education. Why are we bending now? This was... And again, and the Rabbi said the most upsetting thing about it is we're bending without somebody even making us bend. It's a Medicaid. It's the water we drink. It's the air we're breathing. This is why the Rebbe was so deeply passionate about his position, about Chochmas Chitzonius. And in the Tanya, the Rebbe explains the principle of it. It's B'tamach Chabad. It does something to the brain, which is not good. Anyway, this is all last week, okay? So Chochmas Chitzonius is not, we're not going to call it Klipa, we're going to call it Tumah. And I want to again repeat the difference between the two words. Klipa, at least that's how I'm using the terms, okay? I'm the teacher, I'm using the terms as I wish. Klipa means bad. Tumah means not good. And there's a very big difference between bad and not good. Bad is an Aveda. Not good means it's not connected to the Meibishter. But not connected to the Meibishter has a different energy. And when not connected to the Meibishter has an energy which touches the human mind, the consequences are far-reaching. This is the sense that the Alter Rebbe is trying to communicate. So you're not allowed to hope that, but you are allowed to Chochmas Chitzonius. Fact is, people learn it all the time. Huh? And this didn't start in America. European Jews learned how to support themselves, and if they needed to, they learned languages and other skills. So the Alter Rebbe says, to learn Chochmas Chitzenius as a Chochma, you're not allowed. For a person to dedicate himself to learning Chochmas Chitzenius as a curiosity, as an interest, is not allowed. And like I told you, the Gemara says, Rashi brings in Chumash, even if you finish the whole Torah, you're not allowed to learn. The Devar to a bar. A person has to be bar. Bar means in Divrei Torah, and not in anything else, even if they've already mastered Kol HaTorah Kula. So this becomes the issue. So when are you allowed Chochmas Chitzenius? So the Alter Rebbe says two things. Elim came. The exception is Oiseh, Oison, Kardem Lachta Behem. If a person, the last lines on page 26. Page 26. How many lines from the end is it? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines before the end of Bereshit. Elim came unless Oiseh, Oison, a person makes his study of Chochmas Chitzenius. Kardem means a hatchet, an axe. Lachta Behem, to cut with it. The Hainu, this means Kedei Lispadnes Mehen Berevach, to have a parnasa, and he adds the word berevach, to have a comfortable parnasa. Then you're allowed. A person is allowed to learn Chochmas Chitzenius. You could even say there's a mitzvah to learn Chochmas Chitzenius, because parnasa b'fadas ibn basic, to support your family is a mitzvah. So if this is a hachsha mitzvah, if you can't support your family without learning a skill, you have to learn a skill. But that's what it is. It's an umdas, it's a skill. And as a teacher who's involved with young people, I want to say that this is what I find. You can have kids, and again, I'm opening up an issue that I don't want to explain from all angles. Kids can go to college, and they know they park. It means nothing to them. They go, they get their degree, they're finished, they have a job, and it's never happen. Other kids go to college, and it changes them. Which kids are affected severely, and which kids are not affected severely is very hard to predict. It's very hard to know before which kids. I heard I have a neighbor. He's already in Ilma Emes more years than I live on Sterling Street. His name is Benzin Shafran. Benzin is from Pastor before I moved to Sterling Street. Benzin Shafran is college educated. He came from Chicago. He lived in Lubavitch, and his mother wanted very much he should go to college. And he told his mother, the Rebbe said, "No, it's nicht." So she was putting pressure on him, and he told the Rebbe that his mother wants to go to college, and of course he's not going. And the Rebbe said, "Go." And the Rebbe said to him, "Bazeh haloshen, dain yiras shamayim v'dir v'ashitz." Imagine the Rebbe told the Betzin Shavan, heard from one of his kids, "Your yiras shamayim are protected. It's okay, you can go. Your mother wants you to go, okay." And the Rebbe has what we call aspaklaria ameira. The Rebbe knows exactly. Your mother wants you to go. Go. I'm letting you go. Not for you necessarily. Your mother wants you to go get an education. The Rebbe said to him, your fear of heaven. The Rebbe is able to look at a person and size him up and say, you know. It's very, very difficult to know. And the rule is usually the more intelligent they are, the more dangerous it is. The smarter they are, the more it doesn't just give them information. It triggers the light hormones. It becomes their identity. A Pasha, the kid goes to school, gets a degree, and it's a parnasa. He's making a living. So it's interesting, and this is why it's a sakona. And at the very least, you push it off as late as possible. The Rebbe's shita was that you think about making a living when you need to make a living. This is really the un-American component of the Rebbe's approach. The Rebbe said, "You're a bacher, learn. Yeah, but I'm going to get married. You have to support a family." And then what else? You get married, you worry about supporting a family. So right away you say, "Yeah, but the day I get married, I got to pay rent." And the Rebbe's answer is, "They should tell them." But that doesn't always sound so reasonable. Today in America, it's so easy. It's really so easy because of student loans and all kind of other things to do this. You don't want to go on shlichus. You want to become a professional. Well, you're a bacher, you sit and learn Torah. After you finish learning Torah in yeshiva, that becomes a different question. Because you have a chi of a palas. That's how the Rebbe looks at it. And unfortunately, what's become of the issue is, like I told you last time, nobody wants to be angry at the Rebbe. So you're angry at the person who tells you what the Rebbe says. But you can't mess around. The Rebbe really was not open-minded about this. The Rebbe sent so many people to college. The Rebbe sent so many people to college. It's the Rebbe's business. But the public position that the Rebbe took was this. And this is the reason. There's a lot of reasons, but this is one of the reasons. It's the Tamach Abacha Benefesh, and this is not some kind of mystical thing. It's a real thing. People's hashkafas olam can change. Their very philosophy of life can change. And the philosophy of life of the Jew has to be Jewish, period. Period. Not fancy Jewish, not complex Jewish, simple Jewish. This is how it's supposed to be. This is the, I always tell the kids, you don't have to listen to the Rebbe, but you can't change what he said. You don't have to listen. Yeah, but I can't go against the Rebbe. And I need to go against the Rebbe. So we have to, that game you cannot play. So the Alter Rebbe says, this is the halacha. If a person needs to learn a trade for the sake of parnasa, so he's allowed, and like I said, you can even take some mitzvah. Now I want to pause here. I want to tell you something. There's a letter from the Rebbe, written on these few lines of Tanya, written to a great Talmud Chacham, a great Gaon, whom the Rebbe had a special relationship with. His name was Harav Alter Hilowitz. I met his grandchildren. Rabbi Alter Hilowitz was a Rosh Hashanah, a Russian Jew. His sisters were married to big Chassidim. Grace, I think that Shilim was his shvagin. Rabbi Alter Hilowitz was a Gaon. He was a genius. He was a Gaon in Teda, and he was also a Gaon in Chochmas. He lived in Russia in the 20s and the 30s, in the difficult years. He came out of Russia. He was a frum Jew, but he was an intellectual. He was a scholar. He was an academic. He was an intellectual, but he had a very deep Hasidic yesod. He was a big Rosh Hashiva at Yisrael. You see his Sfarim, how his Talmidim write about him. He was considered a Gadol B'Yisrael. He wasn't a card-carrying Lubavitcher like I'm a card-carrying Lubavitcher, He was a Lubavitcher like Rabbi Zevin was a Lubavitcher, which is plenty Lubavitch, And he had a very special correspondence with the Rebbe for many, many years. And you see how he writes about the Rebbe. When he publishes his Sfarim, in the beginning of each Sefer, he prints a Sikha, and he writes, I got permission from the Rebbe. He says it with such humility and such joy. The Rebbe has allowed me to reprint one of his Sikhas as the Akdam in his Sefer. That's how he felt about the Rebbe. So he had this relationship going back many, many years. He was a very big scholar, and the Rebbe engaged with him. In other words, the Rebbe wrote to him more than he even asked. The Rebbe used to share things with him. The things that the Rebbe used to write you even letters, you look at him now, you realize the Rebbe Pasha wanted to put it into the world. So he found that's an excuse. You wrote him good mornings, he wrote a whole speech about mornings. Because he wanted there's certain sugyas. So this sugya of the end of Perek Ches, the Rebbe wanted to flush it out. He wrote to the Rebbe about it. And the Rebbe developed it. And what the Rebbe said was that the Alter Rebbe says one thing. But there really are 5. There are 5 different hatadim for a person to learn Chochmas Chitzenius. One of them is Kadem Lachtach Behen. Okay, which make up Parnasa. So I want to go through that list. The 5 hatadim to learning Chochmas Chitzenius. And of course, it becomes a heter that it's not tumah anymore. If Torah permits it, then it's no longer tumah. But it's just a Torah, assuming that the kavanah is correct. So even though the Alter Rebbe only brings one, but the Rebbe says that there's really 5 heterim, Parnas is only one of them. So here we go. Number 1, where a person learns Chochmas Chitzonius in the Torah itself. In the Torah itself, you have data, information about biology, about health, about earth science, about all kinds of things. Now, a lot of people will tell you that the Torah science is very, very different than the science of science, but it's still Torah talking about what's called in the Rambam, Ma'aseh Bereishis. Torah has not much, but enough to make you uncomfortable about other areas of Chochmah. And the first heter is a person is learning in the Torah Chochmah. If you're learning in the Torah about biology, it's not, the Rebbe said, can you make a berachas Torah on it? The famous word, when they landed on the moon, this is the 50th anniversary landing on the moon, they landed like June it was. The Rebbe spoke about the moon landing. It's a big tumult. The 50th anniversary of landing on the moon is being celebrated in the academic circles. But I know that they're talking about the landing on the moon. And the Rebbe spoke about the landing on the moon 50 years ago. And at that time, the landing on the moon created a lot of halachic questions. Because there are certain things that the Rambam writes that the landing on the moon disproved. There are certain things that landing on the moon showed that the Rambam was wrong. Not just a question of geocentrism or geocentrism, but what is the nature of the moon? Rambam writes that the moon is smarter than people. The moon is a bigger intellectual than a human being. And the moon is a rock. It's a lifeless rock. My father was like, told me, he says, they're going to find nothing. And they found nothing. They found nothing. It's a rock. The moon. As my father told me. So the people got a big issue. I don't understand. The Rambam says it's ephemeral, it's ruchnius, and it's a rock. Moreover, this is a bigger shaila. The Rambam says that the heavens are made from different material than the earth. That the earth is made from 4 elements: fire, wind, water, earth. The heaven is made from a 5th element, God. And they discovered that the moon is made from the same stuff the earth is made. And I can go on and on and on. There's so many problems came to be. One of the examples that they brought at that time was that you say in Kiddush Levana, but women don't say Kiddush Levana. When you do Kiddush Levana, you do this. You jump 3 times. Before you say Baruch, they say, just like I'm dancing opposite you, and I cannot touch you because it's 250,000 miles away. My enemies should not be able to touch me in a bad way. In other words, how far away should my enemy be from me? 250,000 miles. That's a safe distance. So they touch the moon. From the Gemara. Yeah? And they're touching the moon. So these issues created a lot of disturbance in certain circles. And the Rebbe spoke about it. The Rebbe said, it says in the Siddur, doesn't say that you can't stand on the moon. It says when you're standing on the earth and the moon is opposite, you can't touch it. The answer is in the words of the Siddur. But there were G'dei Yisrael, whose name I'm not going to mention, but they're very famous personalities, who came out publicly and announced that the first 4 prakim of Rambam are not Torah. The first 4 prakim of Rambam, which describes that the elements, the malachim, and the astronomy, that's not Torah. And the same is true when you get the whole business of Kiddush HaChedesh, the entire section in Rambam, which deals with how you determine the position of the moon. That the Rambam himself writes that the Bnei Yisachar wrote Svarim, the Jews had ancient writings about this which are lost. So Kabbalah, Emes, Adisha, Omri, we take them from the Greeks. Nobody follows those models anymore. We have a whole different way of understanding, a much simpler model. I mean, the way they understood orbits and rotations and motions and ripples and anomalies in the lunar orbit, it was so complicated and so weird. They're very simple solutions to these problems today. The Rambam describes the ancient way of understanding all of these things. Everybody knows that that's what they understood then. We got smarter, we have better technology. It's not Torah. So the Rebbe spoke about this and wrote about this. And the thing about it is, the Rebbe is the bigger Talmid Chacham than those people. And more important, the Rebbe is a much bigger God than those people. I just want you to know, I'm not going to say names, that I heard a certain famous Rosh Yeshiva who would never look at a television, who went to watch the lunar landing. Because in his mind, if they land on the moon and they don't fall through it like it's ether, there's a lot of problems. And he watched the lunar landing and he came to the Beis HaMedrash, he says to Talmidim, this isn't Torah. So the Rebbe spoke about it and defended it. It's a long story. The Rebbe asked a simple question. Let me ask you. If you get up in the morning and you want to learn Kiddush HaChedesh, are you allowed to learn without saying before you eat a peach, you make a better priya eitz, right? Huh? Yeah. Before you shake a lulav, you make Alan Til's lulav. Before you make a bracha, before you light Shabbos candles, before you separate challah, you say Lahadlik Neshel Shabbos Kedesh, as we say it, or Lahafish challah. Yeah. Before you learn Torah, you have to learn every single morning. We get up, we say 2 or 3 brachas. If you learn this Perek and Rambam, you have to say it or not. So you stop. Of course, you have to say it. You said, it's Torah. Or you know if it's Torah, but you just said it's not Torah. It's tricky, complicated. And of course, Rebbe's simple point is, if you don't understand something, that doesn't change what it is. That just changes your understanding. You know, you're a bull. Torah's aim say, nicht alpha. So there is a lot of science in Torah, and it gets tricky, and it gets complicated, because of the conflicts between the science that's outside and the science that's inside. And that's mutter. You're allowed to learn that. No one is going to say to you, don't learn Kiddush HaChedesh Rambam, because the Chacham is going to say this. That same Chacham from a different book Unless you need it, it becomes... That's the first category. The first category, I'm reading inside, Yediyas Chochmas Elu Min HaTorah. Learning Chochmas Chitzenius as it's found in the Torah. And the Rebbe gives examples. Number 2. I guess I'll read the Rebbe's initial words. Limud Chochmas Elu Ki Torah Mitzava Al Zeh Be'efen Yosher. When you're learning secular knowledge from secular sources, by direct Torah mandate, the Torah requires you to learn it. For example, Kiddush HaChodesh. For example, Erev, right? The halacha of an Erev Tchumen, outside of a city, requires you to understand geometry. You can't do it without understanding geometry because you have to measure distances and you have to make right angles. You cannot do it correctly. So the Torah says, you're a Rav, you have to determine when the new moon is going to be sighted, when the Chodesh is. You have no choice but to learn astronomy. So you're learning it not only in the Rambam, you're learning it in astronomical sefer. So obviously you're going to learn the mathematics that goes along with it. Or you want to figure out the halachas of an Erev, or the halachas of a Sukkah, which also requires a certain knowledge of geometry. So you're learning it from a Goyish source, but the Torah gave you a mitzvah to learn. When Torah tells you, in order to fulfill this mitzvah, in order to pass this halacha, you have to learn these things, even if you learn them from Goyish sources. That's the second head for learning Chochmas Chitzenius. And by the way, included in this something even more unpleasant, sinister. It's asur for a year to study Avodah Zarah altogether. It's asur. It's asur for a year to study Avodah Zarah altogether. It's a chiyuv on bezin to know every Avodah Zarah in the world. A Jew is not allowed to study Avodah Zarah. It's not allowed. A Jew is not allowed to study other religions. It's asur. A person goes to school, when he becomes an expert in comparative religions, there's even a laugh. You're not allowed to learn it. It's teif. And I found it so fascinating that some Jew who made a living teaching comparative religion is calling Basar Avodah Zarah. Every minute of his day, even in the Lav De'eraisa, which is bordering on Avodah Zarah, because you're not allowed. You're not allowed to make a parnasa from teaching Avodah Zarah. It's not allowed. Sanhedrin have a chiyuv to know it. They're mechuyev to know it. They're mechuyev to know it not because it's interesting, not because it's their career, but because they need to know it. The pasuk in the Shaila of Chas v'Sholom, when he is accused of an Avodah Zarah. So you have many examples of other things outside of Torah. That's not the pshat. The Torah gives you a heter. The Torah gives you a chayif. You have to learn this in order to be able to remember Sanhedrin. That's category number 2. Category number 3. This is interesting and very down to earth. When a person is forced to keep his mind occupied, and in order to keep his mind occupied, he has to think something intelligent. For example, if he's in a bathroom, if he's in a place of tumah, you're not allowed to think divrei Torah. If you're a smart guy and you're not allowed to think divrei Torah, you're not. I look at the tiles on the floor, the different formations. You have to keep yourself busy. You're not allowed to think divrei Torah, so you have to keep your mind occupied. So now you have a chiyuv to think another chokhmah to keep your mind away from thinking divrei Torah. So in other words, since your mind is racing and you're lamdan and you're thinking divrei Torah, and it's also thinking divrei Torah, so you have to fill your mind with another chokhmah. You're mechuyev. So you have to know it. That becomes a third heter. The Torah is not telling you must learn Chochmas Chitzenius. The Torah is telling you have no choice but to learn Chochmas Chitzenius, because you have to keep your mind occupied in a way other than limud Torah. That's the third head. He brings Shmuel. The Gemara says about Shmuel. Shmuel was an incredible astronomer, one of the greatest astronomers ever. Shmuel. A lot of the halachas that we have of Kiddush HaChodesh are based on Shmuel. So the Gemara says about Shmuel, he'll be called a doctor. It says the Sefer of Adam Kadmon. There's a Sefer of Adam Arishon. Somebody wanted to give Shmuel smichas. Shmuel was Raf's contemporary, the greatest Amiroim in Baba. Not Shmuel. No, Shmuel, the contemporary of Raf, the greatest Amiroim. The 3 fathers of Talmud are Rav, Shmuel, and Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan lived in Eretz Yisrael, and they lived in Bava. Rav and Shmuel. Rabbi Yechanan had smicha. Rav had smicha. Shmuel did no smicha. So somebody wanted to give him smicha. He didn't want to take it. He says, I saw a Sefer Adam Kadmo. I saw the Sefer Adam Rishon. It's in Yeruch. It's Sefer Ruch HaKodesh. And it says in that sefer, Shmuel will be called a doctor, he will not be called a Rav. So I have a medical degree, and that's it, it's enough. He was not a Rav, he had no smicha, but the greatest Tabelai. And one of his areas of greatest expertise was astronomy. He was a big maven in astronomy. So someone said to Shmuel, what right do you have? He says, I studied astronomy in a place where I was not allowed to learn Torah. He learned quick. I learned astronomy in a place. So that's the third heter for learning Chochmas Chitzonius. Number 4. Okay? Tishalei Metera. Or Shechofetz L'kayim Mitzvah. V'ef Shalei Mipnei Chisarein Yediyah B'Chochmas Chitzonius. You're learning Torah. And you're trying to understand something. And you can't understand it because you lack knowledge. And the only way to get that knowledge is by becoming an expert in this area. This is very similar to the second category. If the second category is what Torah commands you to learn it. And here, you're not commanded to learn it, you're choosing to learn it. You're learning Torah. Like, give the example from Rav and Shmuel, I mentioned Shmuel, Rav and Shmuel were contemporaries, yeah? It's ironic. Shmuel lived in Nardo. Nardo was a very, very big city. It was like New York or Paris. And there was an enormous amount of commerce, business, international business and trade. So the halacha is, halacha b'Shmuel mamena. Shmuel understood business better than Rav. Business. So whenever Rav and Shmuel argue, they argue on every page in the Shas, when it comes to matters of business, you trust Shmuel because he understood business. Rav lived in a smaller town. Rav went to live amongst shepherds for 18 months. He went to live amongst shepherds. And he watched them deliver sheep, and he watched stillborn sheep. And look, he did what you would call today new dissection. He studied the animals up close to be able to understand the halachas of this of a head, what's kosher and what's teif. That's why the halacha is, when it comes to business, the halacha is like Shmuel. When it comes to Isra Heter, when it comes to kosher and teif, the halacha, the hilchos like Rabbi Yisura, or Shmuel Mamei. So here, Rav didn't have a chiyuv. He volunteered. He wanted to know. The only way for him to know was to learn. That becomes the 4th category. So let's talk these 4 over, okay? Category number 1, you're learning Chochmas Chitzonius in Torah. Category number 2, you're learning Chochmas Chitzonius. Torah commands you to learn it. This is particularly true by a Sanhedrin, by Bezdin. They have to know certain things. Category 3, you're learning Torah because of your honest. You're not allowed to think. You're learning Chochmas Chitzonius. You're not allowed to think Torah in certain places. You have no choice but to keep your mind occupied. You have to learn Chochmas Chitzonius. And category number 4 is when you have a Choysa Yediyah in Torah. You want to understand Torah, but in order to understand the correct Torah, I mean, any person who does treifis, I mean, I have smicha, but my smicha is an embarrassment to the institution. I mean, my smicha is a hang on my wall. I have too much self-respect. I don't deserve smicha. I don't deserve smicha at all. But I have smicha. The Rebbe said before you get mad, I'm smicha, but I'm not a Rav. I'm not a Rav at all. But you learn treifis. They don't do treifis anymore. Treifis is boring and technical and very long. They took it away. When I was growing in yeshiva, I learned treifis. Treifis is massive. It's very, very big. And it's every part of the animal, of the anatomy of the animal, a separate chapter. The brain, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the spleen. And all the halachas of when it's kosher, when it's treif, and how you check it, it's very technical. Anybody who studies treifis has to look at a behemoth. You have to no choice. Look at, if you're going to really be up, look at a behemoth. When I did smicha, my grandfather had a film from a famous Rosh Yeshiva who was already in Elam Behemoth, who was one of these brilliant guys. He knew everything. He knew the whole Torah, but he knew everything else. So he actually, on a video, he did it together with Teitelbaum. His name is Rabbi Belsky, Bishol Belsky, Allah Shalom. He took a little calf that was dead, and he opened it up, and he went through every part of the behemoth, and he showed you. Remember you learned Shulchan Aruch, this is this, and this is this, and this is this, this is this. The problem was, I was really not interested. I wanted to pass the exam. But he actually showed you each part of the behemoth, and he explained to you how it would look if there would be a shayla, how it would look if it would be kosher. He was teaching it to you hands-on. He taught you Yeda Deya. So this is, you're learning it. It's not in the Chumash, it's not in the Gemara, it's in the behemoth. So you have to know what you're going to know today. Those are 4 categories. And there's a 5th. What's the 5th? The 5th is the one the Alter Rebbe brought. For Parnas. Hey, ha'is chakmus, b'mida adrusha v'lo yoiser, ba'asakov, k'dei limtze Parnasasei, oy kishe eise, me'achochmes atzmon umnes, v'kardun lachterich behen, that if a person is learning Chochmas Chitzenius to have enough proficiency to be able to make a living, or to learn a skill from which he will make a living, then it's a heter to learn Chochmas Chitzenius. Okay, so the Rebbe, what he does is the Alter Rebbe just brings one, and the Rebbe opens it up, and the Rebbe knows title like you know how many fingers you have. And he makes it all so easy. He says there's 5 groupings, and I assure you there's not a 6th. I assure you there is not a 6th. And I also assure you that you can't crunch them into 4. It's 5. The Rebbe is oimed. It's 5, not more, not less. When you're learning it from the Torah, when Torah tells you to learn it, when you're forced by Torah to learn it, when you needed to understand Torah, and we needed to make a living. Why did the Rebbe do this in his letter to Rabbi Hilowitz? Why did the Rebbe do it? The Rebbe wasn't only interested in developing, expanding what the Alter Rebbe says about Panos. It's because of the next words. Look in your Tanya. Look at Mamish, the last 2 lines of chapter 8, page 26. The last 2 lines. Oh, there's another head. And the Rebbe wants to present to this Harav Hilowitz the following. There are people who learn Chochmas Chitzenius because they need it for a reason. For a reason. A, I'm learning it in Torah. B, I'm learning it because Torah tells me to. C, I'm learning it because I'm forced to. D, I'm learning it because I need it. And 5, E, because I need something else. But there's a 6th. And the 6th, a whole other kettle of fish. And the Rebbe sets this all up to bring out, to emphasize the chiddush of the 6th. What is the 6th? Some people know how to use Chochmas Chitzenius for serving Hashem and for Torah. They learn Chochmas Chitzenius not as a means for an end, but as an end. Because when they are learning Chochmas Chitzenius, that is Avodas Hashem, and that is Toras Hashem. And the Rebbe continues, V'zehu Tanya shel Rambam v'Ramban. You know who learned Torah like that? The Rambam learned like that. The Ramban learned Torah like that. Then he finishes, of course, V'sayaton. People of that ilk, of that category, Shav Oskub, had they learned Chochmas Chitzenius. Yidden on that level, it's not the pshat they have a heter. It's not the pshat they have a mitzvah. It's an avodah. And the Rebbe brought these whole 5 levels to contrast the 5 from the 6th. The Alter brings you 2 things. But in order to emphasize the difference between the first and second, the Rebbe says, let's open this up. There are really 5 hetatim, not 4, not 1. But the 5 are hetatim. I have a reason why I'm allowed to learn it. A, I'm learning it in Torah. B, Torah tells me to learn it. C, Torah forces me to learn it. D, I needed to understand Torah. E, I needed to make a living, which is a mitzvah written in the Torah. And then there is F. I learn Chochmas Chitzenius because as I learn it, it's Avodas Hashem. As I learn it, it's Torah. But for that, you got to be a Rambam. You have to be a Ramban. You know, people. The truth of the matter is, it's so silly. But people. How did they ever go to college? That question reflects such a deficiency in an understanding what the word the Rebbe means. The Rebbe used to say, people love to imitate my husband. Let them start from the eating and sleeping, not from the socks. The Rebbe used to say, people love to imitate. Let them start. The Rebbe never ate. The Rebbe never slept. Never. Don't start with the silk socks. And with the white suspenders. Start with Ethnic Shlov. You want to understand the Rebbe? And it's people ask it. I asked it as a kid. It's a chesed. Because it's what are you comparing yourself to the Rebbe? Why the Rebbe? What are you? It's not that Pshat is bigger and smaller. It's a whole other situation. And the Rebbe over the years, the Rebbe was very opposed to young people going to college. He really was. I'm sure you saw Chana Sharfstein's piece. It's a fascinating piece. Chana Sharfstein had a very... That was like her father. Her father had passed when she was an 18-year-old girl. It was very tragic. But the Rebbe was incredibly close to her, and the way you listen to Chana Sharfstein talk about the Rebbe, she sounds like the Rebbe's singer. She's a modern woman. But when she talks about the Rebbe, she oozes with love. It's so beautiful. You turn her on to page Rebbe and you see a chosed question. So she tells her stories. She has all of her stories with Rebbe. One of them was that when she was already with adult children, or semi-adult, which she was able to when her children were not that little, she went back to school. And she got a degree, and she wrote a dissertation. I don't know what the doctoral dissertation. She had to write something. So what did she choose to write on the community of Crown Heights? And I think she called it A World Within a World. And the Rebbe asked her to see it. And the Rebbe edited the entire paper beginning to end. But I think the Rebbe added it after she had already gotten her score. The Rebbe went through every page and read and made corrections. It was so flattering. And one of the points she writes about was about going to college. And she expresses it so clearly. She thought it through. And she understood it. She couldn't write it, but she understood it. What she writes is that young people are still developing their hashkas. Young people are still in the process of developing how they think about the world. And she writes that until a person has a solid philosophy of life, they shouldn't go to college. That's the shita. Kids are kids. When they're 19, 20, 21, they don't see themselves as kids. They see themselves as smart guys. And sharper and quicker and wittier than their alta elton. But they're children. They're very impressionable. They don't see the big picture. They're tunnel. They're kids. Big kids, but kids. So she wrote that the philosophy in Chabad is that until a person has a very solid philosophy of life, they shouldn't go to college. So the Rebbe added the words, shouldn't think about going to college. Shouldn't think about it. And this is the idea, because it's a Kodesh Habadov. Now, but to get to the Rebbe, going back to the Rebbe over the course of his Nesius many times found himself in the position of justifying, yes, I'm going to college. The Rebbe spent a lot of time talking to people. And people sometimes didn't necessarily give the Rebbe the respect that he deserved. And people used to tell the Rebbe straight, I shouldn't go to college, what about you? You know? And the Rebbe had to explain. And of course, the Rebbe talked to each person, not where the Rebbe was, but where that person was. There's so many stories. There's so many stories. One of the stories is that a kid, 20, 21, 22, smart kid, was by the Rebbe Yechidus. He said to the Rebbe, you went to college? The Rebbe said, I'll tell you what. Before I went to college, I knew the whole Bible, the whole Yerushalmi, the whole Rambam, the whole Shulchan Aruch, all the Nesekim. Learn all of that, and you have my blessing. Then you can go to college. You understand? Okay. But the Rebbe gave different people different answers. The Rebbe told people, you know why I don't want you to go to college? Because I went. He said, if someone drinks poison and doesn't die, you're going to drink it. If someone jumps off a building and doesn't break his leg, you're going to jump. I said, forget it. The reason I have such a clear opposition to it is because I know what's going on there. I was there. And everybody who would ask the question would get different kinds of answers. But I heard other kinds of stories. L'moshel. Do you know that one of the greatest Rebbes in all the history of Hasidus was the college graduate? His name was Rabbi Peshischa. Have you heard of Rabbi Peshischa? There was the Yiddah Kodesh Peshischa. Then there was Rabbi Peshischa. Rabbi Peshischa was the Rebbe of the Kotzker, who's the Rebbe of the Gerer Rebbe, and many other famous Chassidus. Rabbi Peshischa was a pharmacist by profession. He was a tzaddik. He was a Talmud of the Yiddah Kodesh. The story with Yiddah Kodesh is as follows. His Rebbe of Yehesen, Rabbi Yitzchak Yangav Alevi Horowitz. His Rebbe was the famous Chayza of Lublin. You ever heard of the Chayza of Lublin? Yeah? His name was Yitzchak Yangav Alevi Horowitz. He had a Talmud whose name was Yitzchak Yangav Alevi Horowitz, and exactly the same name. While his Rebbe was alive, while the Chayza was still alive, the Chayza passed away in 1815, Tov Kuf Ayin Tisha B'Av, is of Yortzeh. While he was still alive, the Yiddah Kodesh opened his own shop. His Talmud became his competitor in Bishitche. And the Chayzer was very hurt. The Yiddah Kodesh passed away before his Rebbe. He died very young. He passed away before his Rebbe. But the Yiddah Kodesh was a famous Rebbe in Pashis. He was very sharp. This the source of Gerech Chassidus, of Kotz Chassidus. The Chassidim were very sharp. This traced to the Rebbe Rabbunim. The Rebbe Rabbunim went to college and he was a pharmacist. So the Rebbe was talking to a Yid, a big line, with Gerech roots. And he said, I want to ask you a question. How do the Gerech Chassidim look at the Rebbe Rabbunim? People are coming to me. I'm asking you a question. The Rebbe and the Buddha went to college. Anybody's going to say Akasha? You understand? The Rebbe said, explain it to me. You know, you're going to compare. So here in Tanya, the Rebbe gives a crystallized separation between the Rebbe and everybody else. In Tanya, the Rebbe provides an insight to understanding how different it is. Most people who want to learn Chochmas Chitzenius need a heter. The Rambam learned Chochmas Chitzenius doesn't need a heter. The Ramban does need a heter. You know why? Because it's Avedas Havaya V'Teirasa, in that order, not Teiras Havaya V'Avedasa. Right? Look at the language. La Avedas Havaya V'Teirasa. Now, which comes first? I'm asking you. Teira or Aveda? The Pashtas first you learn, and then you do. There are some Yidden that Avodah come before Torah. You understand? Avodah is Avodah. The Rambam learned Chochmas Chitzenius because he had a curiosity. The Rambam learned Chochmas Chitzenius because he wanted to be Mishtaleh, he wanted to feel worldly and intellectual. The Rambam didn't even learn Chochmas Chitzenius because he needed to be a doctor. The Rambam became a doctor because the person who was supporting him died. He had no choice. The Rambam learned Chochmas Chitzenius because they were in the Madrega of Rambam. It's Avodah Hashem and Teiras Hashem in that order. For Avodah to come before Torah, you have to be Chadbiyah and the Madrega. A tzaddik engages in Chochmas Chitzenius. It's a whole different, it's another concept. So this is what the Rebbe is trying to develop here. There are Heteirim for the Rebbe. The Rebbe brings only one. The Rebbe brings all five. And then there's something else. But that something else is for somebody else. You understand? That heter of learning Chochmas Chitzenius is for a different kind of human being. The Rebbe went to college. They put a book. It's called Early Years. The volume Early Years goes till the Rebbe's Chassanim. But a lot of the Early Years is based on film. The book Early Years is really a remarkable sefer. I've heard that they're not making the second krach because it wasn't sufficient just in the first. But that's such a pity because it's a wonderful book. The best part of the Early Years, every single story is sourced. So they were mafasim years ago in films how the professors are describing the Rebbe in college. He's an incredible student, but he never shows up. He missed more than half the days in his notes of his university years. Never came to school. Rabbi Yossi Soloveitchik said that he was in college with Rebbe in Berlin. He wasn't with Rebbe in Paris, Berlin. He was the Rebbe Sapir Gemara Tanya, and he was learning. And the professors would get very frustrated. So one of the professors said, Schneerson, what are you reading a book? He says, I'm listening. Yeah? Stand up and repeat what I said. So he repeated verbatim the entire lesson. So Rabbi Yashaber came the next day with a Gemara also. But he said, I can't do two things. I don't know how he does it. He's learning Gemara. He's taka learning. You can see he's learning. I heard every word. He's like, I could do either this. The Rebbe was a genius, but it wasn't that Rebbe. The Rebbe had his brain split into I don't know how many pieces. This part of the brain was listening to the professor. This part of the brain was studying Torah. The professor after he gave it back verbatim. He just gave back the words. So he never bothered him again. So man geht verstehen. The Rebbe is going to college. And somehow decide that this is the basis for how we should look at these kinds of things. The Rebbe's, you know what it is? The Rebbe's home at sea is Avodah Hashem and Torah. We serve God. He's a servant of God. You know, you can have later on in Tanya, chapter 15. There's Eved Hashem and there's Oived Hashem. What's the difference between the word Eved Hashem and Oived Hashem? Eved Hashem is called the Shem HaToyah. His definition is that he serves God. Oived Hashem is the Shem HaPa'ula. He's a person who's a slave of Hashem. A Rebbe, a tzaddik, is Eved Hashem. His mitzvah is a service. He eats breakfast, it's Avodah Hashem. He takes a walk, it's Avodah Hashem. A notion can't take you with people who are trying their best to serve the Hashem. There are different rules. And in this end of Perechas, the Alter Rebbe articulates it with this nafkamina. You understand? So I want to stop now. This class is going on too long. The good news is, I guess, as cynical as this sounds, is that next Sunday we will start Pedic test. I just want to read again the few lines that we read today. I want you to read it inside, okay? I'm reading it inside. The last 5 lines of the page. So, Chochmas Chitzenius Metama Chabad Shebbayach Elim Kain, unless Oysa, the person is doing the Kardim as a hammer, Lachtach, to cut with them. The Hainu Kedei Lispanis Mehem Benev Tapanosa comfortably Lavad Abayt Shebbayach. And the Rebbe makes this into 5, and then just 6. You're talking about the kind of person who knows how to use them in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu or the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is not a heter, you understand? This is a mitzvah. But it's a mitzvah for who? For the Rambam it's a mitzvah. For the Ramban it's a mitzvah. I'm going to finish with this. That the Tzemach Tzedek had a relative. Tzemach Tzedek had a relative. I don't know if he was a grandson or he was a cousin or a nephew who was bright. There's bright but not bright enough. That's a very special class. When you're bright and not bright enough, you get into a lot of trouble. And I know a lot of people like that, beginning with yours truly. I'm as close with the Al-Bag. I saw that Al-Bag. The Al-Bag writes, why does somebody have to curse him? Because there's too many people who are not smart enough. They're smart enough, but they're smart enough to have issues, not smart enough to find resolutions. So this was a relative of Tzemach Tzedek. He started learning made in the Nevuchim of the Rambam. He had problems. So he came to his uncle, his cousin, whatever it was. And the Tzemach Tzedek talked to him. And the Tzemach Tzedek appreciated that this person's limud is taking him in a place where he shouldn't go. So Tzemach Tzedek told him the following quote. I'll say Yiddish, I'll translate it in English. Der Rambam hat gehad a gesunden Morgen. Gekannt essen, Nechoshim, Krabim, und es hat nicht geschafft. Ich hab euch a gesunden Morgen. Ich kann essen, Nechoshim, Krabim, und es wird mir nicht schaden. Du hast nicht kein gesunden Morgen. Und du darfst ihm nicht lernen. And in English, he says, the Rambam had a good intestines. He could eat snakes and scorpions and it wouldn't harm him. I also have a good metabolism. I can eat snakes and scorpions and it won't hurt me. You don't, and you're not allowed to learn. Okay, we'll take a break and we'll do our Yom Yom. Thank you all for coming.
The people who came to the Rebbe, probably a scholar Tshuva, who had a college education, and the Rebbe sent them back.
Yeah. The
category.
It's shlichus, so maybe it's a riding on the Rebbe's wagon. Those people, Tanya, and what's so funny about it is, these were people who the last thing they wanted to do was go to God. You need the Rabbi Yitzchak Chaneke, Olav Shalom. Yeah, the story with Reuven Dunin, with the tractor. He ran. The tractor for him was a symbol of God, of a desert mamish. And the first words out of Rebbe's mouth, you know how to ride a tractor. He was like, what?
He was really upset.
Okay, we'll learn Hayom Yom in a minute, yo.